What's going on, guys? Kulprit here. Welcome to my Gun Locker series, a series where I review and analyze all the weaponry in Battlefield 4. Today we're going to be taking a look at the L85A2. Now, for those of you who may have noticed, we didn't do a video last week. There's a really good reason to that. When I tend to sit down and focus, okay, I'm going to do a weapon, and L85 particularly, I've been waiting to do this weapon. I've used it. Obviously, we know it's been out for a while. The statistics were not available on simthic.com, and that's a website I rely on to kind of take my impressions, and then I go look at the website and see how they match up. Like, my impressions on it up close, my impressions on it long range. Then I look at the numbers and see if it's maybe a placebo effect in my brain or if it's legitimate, and I'm like, yep, those line up, and that's obviously part of the weapon's profile. Well, those were delayed. They just recently came out, so it was interesting for me to go and do that and compare and things, and most of my impressions lined up. There were a couple surprises that I am going to touch on. But also, last week when I started to focus on this weapon, actually previously to last week because I wanted to put a video out, I was having a real hard time getting a feel for this weapon. Now, I'd used it before, and I was just trying to figure out a profile or, just how to use it, a role for this weapon. I was having a very hard time. Obviously, a lot of us, when we hear L85A2, we kind of think longer range, a la Battlefield 3, it was a slower firing, longer range kind of weapon. That doesn't exactly hold true in Battlefield 4. It strays from that quite a bit, and I'm going to get into that, obviously. So I had a really hard time, and I didn't want to just throw up a half-ass video for you guys. I wanted to keep playing, keep wrapping my head around it, keep kind of figuring out what felt so uncomfortable for me so that I could share that with you guys, and perhaps either you could, get back at me in the comments and kind of we can talk about it and figure it out, or I can help you guys kind of find your way a little bit easier. So without any further ado, let's get right into the pros of the L85. It has a very high rate of fire at 800 rounds per minute. For an assault rifle, that is higher than both the Ace-23 and the 416. You're going to find I'm going to be comparing this weapon quite a lot to the 416 and the Ace-23. I just feel like those are kind of the general baselines of comparison. Those seem to be the most popular weapons we see. Not to say that there aren't other viable weapons. We all know that, and that's exactly what this series is for. But I'm going to be comparing a lot to the Ace-23 and the 416, even mixing in the SCAR a little bit there. It has high muzzle velocity, which is always nice because it makes it a lot easier to aim at targets at medium to long range. You don't have to lead the targets as much if you have a higher fire rate or a muzzle velocity, excuse me. So it's just a nice. It's a nice factor to have being in the plus side for you. It makes it much easier to shoot medium to longer ranges. If you're lacking in that, or say you put a suppressor onto your weapon, it can be a lot harder. You have to lead targets a little bit. You can have a little more drop off. You have to have more experience with a weapon, which is not a bad thing in my opinion. It has very good first shot recoil, basically the same as the SCAR H. Very, very forgiving. It makes it very easy to burst fire the weapon. Has favorable spread while moving, both hip and aim down sights. This is how DICE likes to do bullpup designs. They give you mobility buffs, basically to make it easier for you to move, strafe, move around. Hip fire is benefited, and your ADS while moving. It's very nice. Obviously, people like to move in Battlefield, especially in first-person shooters in general. So having buffed up, spread while doing that is a nice asset. On the flip side, let's talk about the cons. It has a really high reload. Now, I spoke about how DICE likes to balance the bullpup designs with high mobility. Well, they like to kind of nerf them a little bit with really bad reload times. Basically, it's more than a second, both full and empty, or no, partially empty and fully empty magazines, then the 416, and almost a full second to the Ace-23, which can be kind of... It's really hard then to compare this to those weapons when there's that big of a deficit between the two. Recoil, you have more vertical recoil on the L85 than you do with the 23 and the 416, as well as the SCAR. It's got just a little bit more than the SCAR, and it's got more horizontal recoil. Now, horizontal recoil is the one we really kind of focus on. Vertical recoil can be compensated, obviously, through muzzle brake, but also just through, even an angled foregrip, and as well through usage of the mouse. Obviously, I'm speaking towards PC here. But it has more horizontal than all the Ace-23, the 416, and the SCAR H as well, which kind of can make it a hard thing to control because you don't know if you want to, build this weapon to handle the vertical recoil, build this weapon to handle the horizontal recoil, or perhaps you don't want to put any kind of a foregrip on it and get that added spread on there. So you kind of in a little bit of conundrum in that department, and we're going to get to that a little bit later when I talk about how I like to outfit this weapon. This weapon also has a very bad recoil reset. Now, this one's a little bit of a wild card stat. I don't know how exactly this plays out in the game, but when you look at the stats in this weapon, most weapons have an 18 factor. Basically, what the recoil reset is, think about when you're burst firing, the first shot recoil, climbs up, obviously. This is about pretty much how quickly your gun will return to 0 when you stop firing. Doesn't sound like it's a big deal, but if it's a very fast micro bursty type of gun, you want a quick reset so you can get right back, and the faster it resets, the faster faster you can shoot again, basically. This one has about a rating of 4, which is very slow, whereas the average assault rifle factor is about an 18. Again, I don't know exactly what these values are. I think they're degrees per second or something like that, but again, how it translates into actual gameplay is hard to say, but it is way behind all the others. Again, this seems to be one way that they have absolutely kind of nerfed this weapon a little bit. It's kind of interesting to see how that's going to pan out. Now let's talk about my recommended usage, and this is really the question for me, because you look at it, you see the higher rate of fire than most assault rifles. Think, okay, this thing can handle itself up close. Terrible reload that really hinders its CQB ability. You see high muzzle velocity, and you're like, okay, great. But then you've got a lot of recoil, so you know that hinders its longer range ability. So this weapon really seems to be trying to be a jack of all trades weapon, an all-purpose assault rifle, but it has Achilles heels all over the place. While most people think back to BF4, as I mentioned, as the L85 is a slower firing, longer range weapon, it doesn't really hold true in Battlefield 4. It seems to be all over the map. It has strengths and weaknesses all over the place. It doesn't have a real niche. It doesn't have a real total profile to it. It's going to be up to you to use it and figure out how you want to use it and see if you can make it fit. I personally had a kind of a hard time with this, but let's talk about how I prefer to load this gun out when I go out. Now, optics still holds true to most of my assault rifles. RDS or a hollow sight for me are my preferred methods. I've been favoring the hollow sights, but I've been kind of going back to the Cobra lately. I still love the Coyote, but I just find at some maps it just does not work. Obviously, with the glare, it can be hard to pick that little reticle out. The hollow, the HD33, I think it is. Again, I always forget what that one's called. I do prefer that one when I'm using a hollow scope, or like I said, I've gone back to the Cobra sight again. I'm just kind of tired of the Cobra sight with Battlefield 3 for so long, so I'm always trying to use something else. If you're looking for something a little longer, where you might think of the ACOG or something like that, the more magnified optics, you might want to consider in the accessory category the canted irons or the magnifier. They're just going to give you a little bit of magnification, which is really all you need on most of these maps. Let's be honest here, Battlefield 4 is not long range maps typically. You don't usually need a lot of magnification, so you could usually get away with the canted irons, which have a slight bit of magnification. I think it's 1.5 if I'm not mistaken, if you didn't know that in Battlefield 4, and the magnifier, which is a little bit more than that. Barrel. This is really kind of one of the big questions. You want to try it without any barrel attachment. You don't want to. You want to try it without the muzzle brake or the compensator, because by equipping either of those, you're going to take a 30% increase in your spread, which can really hinder you, especially if you're trying to use the L85 as a medium to long range weapon. If you have some hard time handling it, which I did at times, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I was able to snap this weapon, hold it on target, and it felt like a laser. Then the next match, it wouldn't. It would jump all over. I had a hard time controlling it. Sometimes it's hard to tell if that's Battlefield 4, as we all know, or if that's his weapon. So that's why I did a lot of extra time with it. Obviously then a compensator would be my first pick. Let's break down that horizontal recoil and let my mouse and my skill as a player try to compensate for the vertical recoil. As far as the underbarrel, this actually, you have quite a few options here. All of them seem to make somewhat sense, but my first pick would be the ergo or vertical grip. This is the best choice in my opinion because it buffs that mobility buff that I talked to you about with the bullpups. You take a strength of the weapon, let's enhance it further. Now, if you're not going to be playing more of a movement-based, run and gun style, and you're going to be playing more standoffish, I would honestly probably recommend another gun like the Scar H. But if you're going to do that, no problem. This gun can do that, and who knows, in your hands, it might be completely perfect tool for the job, whereas it wasn't for mine. I would probably think about the angled folding, but not really, because this weapon has very low first shot recoil, so the angled folding grip is not really going to do a very good job. You're basically going to be lowering a number that's already pretty low. You're not really going to get much lower than it is, so I would stay away from the angled folding. I would probably go more towards stubby or potato, because it's just a good balanced all-around attachment, decreasing that spread, which again is what you're going to want at a medium to long range. Basically what you're going to do is, if you're going to have the compensator, I would probably recommend to you the stubby or potato. This way they'll both kind of compensate each other out, I guess. I can't think of the word I want to use, but basically you would use the compensator would decrease the horizontal recoil, but it adds spread, whereas the stubby or potato would then reduce that spread back, but you would still get the horizontal recoil reduction. As far as the accessory, I did mention on above. Basically, think about the canted iron sights or the magnifier if you're looking for a little bit long range, a little bit of zoom. I've done that a little bit, but I find I don't really use them that much. Basically, for medium range in, I would go laser to light combo. Obviously, that's, there's really nothing wrong with that. I would only do that if I'm going to be running through buildings, these types of things. If I'm going to be holding a position at any kind of range, I don't like to have that flashlight coming up every time I ADS. Green laser sight's always a good idea to buff that hip fire. Again, the bullpup design has pretty good hip fire, so again, you're just going to be enhancing that. And I find the green laser light is a little harder to see and give away your position. Again, it just depends on your usage. all in all, I enjoyed the L85A2. Like I said, I had some pretty good rounds with it where I would just beast, and it was like a laser. It would snap to people, and with that 800 rounds per minute, it would take them down very quick. But I had other rounds where it felt like I was trying to shove a square into a round hole. It just didn't really fit, whereas I took weapons like the Scar H, and that medium range standoffish cover-to-cover role, it fit it perfectly. It was glaringly obvious to me what role that gun should fill. The L85A2, I had a hard time with that. It seems to be like a gun without an identity, a gun without a really ideal role. It seems to be, try to be an assault rifle, a general purpose assault rifle. Unfortunately, I feel like there's already two beasts in that category in the 416 and the Ace-23, as well as the carbines, so it's really just doesn't quite stack up with them, mostly because of the really bad reload time. The really bad reload time was very hampering for me. As I play, I have very bad accuracy, I miss a lot, I run around, I spray, I like to take pot shots, I'm reloading a lot. I personally need a weapon that has a very good reload time, or I'm going to be hindered. It's a good gun, but without a specific role, it gets bested by the other tier 1 weapons, like the Ace-23 and the 416. And that is my bottom line summary for the L85A2. Let me know what you guys think. I'm particularly interested this week because, like I said, I did have a little bit of a hard time grasping this weapon and really defining its role within my arsenal. I'd like to know how you use it, especially how you equip it, guys. Please let me know your recommended attachment loadouts, and I may come back and revisit this and do another video for you guys. Like always, guys, thanks so much for the support. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like. It encourages me to make many more, and I will talk to you soon, guys. Take care.